But that's the thing. Like, how do you fuck that up? Like, I'm not trained in it, and I just went, well, hang on, shouldn't it be one? We already got the one because it's already a 6-bed, and then it's just add 2. Is that what it is?
And I actually quite like Donald Trump. The first time he was elected, I thought, what has the world come to? You know,
imagine living in a world where you don't have to be liable to your either actions or lack of actions.
I mean, the number one skill set really you can have is be mentally strong, because it is absolutely.
On 1.5x speed, Ryan sounds normal. Fuck me, Stuart sounds like he's on speed.
I constantly try and slow down as well, but there's just so many words that you have to get out. I can't slow down.
I honestly, I think
Roundup sound, real estate deals. We lay them down, let's get those deals. Deals, making money, baby.
We're back, right? Yeah, we're back. Episode 25.
Yeah, missed you boys.
Here we
Feels
are.
like it's been ages since we were together.
This is like the band getting back together.
Band's back together. Yeah, it's been a couple episodes though, a couple of weeks now, isn't it? So we're catching up. For those viewers at home, we're catching up with ourselves. It's 6:30 a.m. But we're filming 2 this week, and I think 2 next week, because we were 1 in hand, and then we had to miss a week, and now we're trying to catch back up. It's a lot of effort getting this podcast done every week, but we're up to 25 episodes, and it's not a lot of effort. It's just coordinating diaries is quite a difficult thing sometimes.
You're all busy, aren't you?
Getting some nice reviews on Instagram. And some messages coming through saying people are really getting into it now, which is quite nice to hear.
Mate.
So do keep them coming.
That's the thing.
And let us know in the comments as well.
We know that if we just stick with this, and it's a long-term game, isn't it? Building a podcast, you want people to get used to the idea of tuning in each week, and it's starting to work out. I think the views are like 250, 300 views on the YouTube channel, which is quite difficult to do for podcasts because you ask people for a lot of their time. But hopefully that means that we're being useful in some way. And today, I think Stu wanted to start it off by getting the boys' reviews on the Bitcoin special.
I just wanted to ask if they watched it. Jack, we didn't catch up because it's been a crazy week and he's been off spending loads of money in Vegas. He's just telling us before we started. That's why, because he said on the text, "Oh, I enjoy watching the Bitcoin thing," and I was thinking what these boys are going to think about it. Whether it was like
D defo didn't watch it. They look at him. He's like, I didn't.
Oh, there's not watched it at all.
Mate,
we know Jack did, so
I've got fires on every front a minute. So I've got to get.
No, right.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually watched it. I went to the Property Investor Show, and the M25 on like the southbound traffic was shut. So on the last day I was driving back, I actually drove east and then all the way around the M25 to get home, and I was like, I know what I can listen to. Put it on 1.5x speed.
Filler.
Ryan sounds normal. Fuck me, Stuart sounds like he's on speed.
I constantly try and slow down as well, but there's just so many words that you have to get out. I can't slow down.
I think it obviously shows how much knowledge you have in the space, and I found it really insightful and it helped me understand it. And I don't understand a lot about the crypto markets, and I think you covered a lot of areas that a lot of people probably wouldn't find within their first hour of education in crypto.
Cool.
I did love it. I do think you bleed crypto still.
Oh mate, total.
Bleed
It's just so nice to have it documented digitally, so I can watch back in 10 years' time when it is adopted and then go, well, I was an early believer, an early adopter. I even though I still feel I'm so late, but well done. That was good. And Dorian, why you not watched it, mate? We had 5 minutes to prepare for that one because obviously someone slept in and was like, "Oh, where the fuck's D? I know what we can talk about."
Yeah. I just fighting fires, my friend. I mean, doing deals left, right, and centre that taking up all of my focus. Which, yeah, it's one of those. We completed on our office. We've launched.
Oh, nice.
So brought somebody on for that, and dealing with a whole finance restructure that's like mega stressful at the moment. So yeah,
D, do you want to explain the I know we've briefly spoken about it before, but for any new viewers as well, just explain what you did with the office, how you got that deal sorted.
Yeah, sure. So I scaling up the business, I did it, just like everybody else, bootstrapped really, because you can only do with what the resources you have. So the first office I had for the business was out of a friend's office. Then it was out of the NatWest Accelerator program that gave me a free office in Cardiff Centre. Then after that, we actually moved into one of our own development projects as an office. It was a semi-commercial building. Then I had to move out when the drilling started and bounced into another local office that just came out. And then this, I had a small team at the time, and this office came up, which is a 7,000 square foot office. And so much bigger than what we needed, with a team of, like, I think at that time it was probably, less, about 10 people in the office maybe. And but what I decided to do anyway was take a lease option out on it and then sublet the office as much as I could and just use the space I needed. And then that kind of worked out. And after 2 years, I triggered the option, and basically the ground floor is all sublet, and obviously I've grown into the first floor, and the mortgage is like 38 grand. No, the mortgage is 38 grand a year, and the rent for the ground floor is 60 grand. So the rent pays for all of the mortgage and the running costs of the business, the building. And then so we have the upstairs technically for free, although obviously my one company will lease to my other company. But yeah, it was and it got valued at 750, and we bought it. It was meant to be 500, but a couple of issues happened, and it ended up being 575. Just what it's like, business negotiating and things not going to plan.
Did you increase the lease that you've given to your other business to then increase the value of the building? So you actually
they disregarded the valuation of every lease on this for this purchase. They valued that 750 was actually valued on vacant possession. So that's just a pure bricks and mortar valuation, vacant possession. Technically speaking, yeah, if I put a tenant in here actually at a if I rented out the whole building, you would get from a gross rent probably now about 90 grand a year, and with them covering all bills as well, FRI lease. So if I got a decent tenant in and even called it, an 8% yield, the valuation would actually be, commercial valuation would be more like £1 million, but bricks and mortar 750.
Lovely.
So £100 a square foot is what it's worth.
Congrats.
Say that again.
It's worth £100 a square foot.
You can't build here. You can't build. Like, there's a piece of land next door. Next door to us, but one is the new Land Rover garage, and but in between now is actually like wildlife's grown in, so it's like a nice ecology green space, but
meadow.
Meadow. But technically, if you was to build on it, you could not build an office unless you had a blue chip tenant like a Land Rover to make it viable from an investment point of view, because the build cost to build one of these now is massive.
That's actually a really good point. I learned quite early on in my property journey with commercial or resi stuff, mainly commercial though, is when you're buying an asset to look at its replacement value, and that's how you really determine competition in the area. So we were buying a building in Reading. It was like the height of COVID. I showed it to someone. I was like, I don't know whether we should go ahead with it or not. And this guy is very experienced, actually has his own podcast, said, what are you buying it for? And I was like, £94 a square foot in RG1 Reading, right next to the train station. And he was like, well, no one can replace that building for the same cost you can. Therefore, you can always undercut them. And therefore, your competition is low. So the replacement value is... So your replacement value is more costly. Someone's probably got to spend 1.5 million quid to build what you now own.
Yeah, but at least,
that's the benefit of buying.
Don't you do that sense check with every? Yeah, exactly. I do that as a sense check with everything we try and buy. Okay, well, I can build it for the land and the build costs what we're buying. And
it's even worse in the northeast, mate. Like you're nowhere near. Like it's like sometimes the reinstatement values are like 3 times the GDV. Which is just, I'm just like,
you're buying a 5-bed house for about 80 grand.
Like
a Vegas trip.
It's like everyone built back in the day, or really inflation is genuinely that bad.
Yeah, inflation is that bad. Well, speaking of which, that is actually going to be the next topic, but I haven't done any DD on this. However, it has been all over the news. So obviously the stuff, we won't get political and bullshit and dive into wars and stuff, but there is...
Oh, we will.
Oh no, okay, yeah, we can. Sweet, let's do it. I mean, I've not done enough research to have like a really well educated answer, but I've seen enough going on to cast an opinion. But there's obviously the progressing contentions in the Middle East between Israel, Hamas, Iran now getting dragged into stuff, and there was a lot of bombing of oil fields and bits and bobs that can lead to inflationary effects for us in the property sector, particularly if you're exposed to a lot of construction work, which all of us are. So just wondered if anyone's got any interesting insights about the war that's going on economically, how that may impact supply chains, how that may impact energy, with oil fields getting bombed, with Russia and China looming in the background, maybe getting involved if Iran becomes more of a talking point in the international community. I know it's contained between Israel and Iran at the moment, but inevitably these things tend to escalate. So then what does that mean for energy prices, which all impacts the supply chain? And we may feel that as a lagging effect in maybe 6 to 12 months time. So
we also have the US election, which is next month, which I think will have a big, very big impact, whether it's obviously Kamala or Trump as well, which I think is probably going to be a quite a big factor, but I'll let the floor speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stu, I think you want to bring it up.
The oil thing was the thing I wanted to bring up, because that's a massive impact. It has a massive impact globally. I think Iran provide about 20% of the oil needs. I mean, America, obviously, if drill baby drill gets in, not only will Bitcoin go to the moon, but and I actually quite like Donald Trump. The first time he was elected, I thought, what has the world come to? But I actually listened to a lot of his stuff now. It's amazing how bad the media make him out to be. And then when you start reading between the lines, I think he's actually going to be a savior for the planet, but we'll see. But if Iran, they've obviously, Biden has obviously warned Iran not to bomb the oil fields, because that will put a 20%, that will just put a massive spike in energy costs. And then that relating to us, that's, especially the HMO guys between us. I mean, that obviously has a massive impact on our OPEX costs. And another reason why I always just see the need to put solar panels and batteries on my sites to try and eliminate as many of these external problems that we can't control, just to have some control on our costs. Because if energy does double and double again, which no one can say it definitely won't, inevitably, obviously you've got the Russia-Ukraine war, Iran war, this is just going to have a massive squeeze on us. So that's just another thing to think about if you're going to rely on any external forces. Well, obviously we've got fuel and stuff. I mean, it's a big problem globally, but a little bit we can control.
Do you think that there'll be a lot of political pressure on Labour to bring in caps again, though, to ensure that they can't double? Or do you think they'll struggle to do that?
Where are they going to get the money? I mean, they can only control so much. I mean,
they'll print it.
Yeah, they'll print it, but they can only control so much. And who knows? I mean, I don't really spend too much time looking at this. I can't control it, so there's no point. But I just think that I can see a massive spike in oil prices again and energy. So let's see what happens.
Interesting. What about you, D? Any insights here?
Yeah, I'm as bad as it sounds, I'm kind of like Stuart, where you can't control these things, and there's also levers the government can do that we also can't control, and some of the things we don't even know what they can do or don't ever see, or they don't talk about it. So there's just so much uncontrollable there that really, from a de-risking point of view, there's kind of nothing much a business can do unless you're kind of cash rich and you want to start buying in futures at certain prices today to then as a hedge in case things go up. But we can't really do stuff like that. So we're just gonna play it by ear really, and try to negotiate with HAs as best as we can on inflation in contracts, because we're still very much in a fixed price contract world. Build cost at the moment is so high. Like anybody that's been in the sector for even the past 5 years, let alone the past decade, will say it's just so high. Like there's so many things you just can't build anymore that viability wise. And it's the same for when you're kind of got a client like a housing association. If you look at the prices they are today and think they have to go up again another 20%, it's just mega, man. You're talking huge money for, like, they'll never solve any housing crisis if that happens. They can't now.
The biggest problem I've heard of, which I don't know enough of, is if energy prices go up and inflation continues. Because obviously if inflation goes up, it normally starts a bit of a depression, because no one can actually trade, because everything is linked to oil. And if stagflation happens, then you've got a load of money being printed and nothing's going up around it. And that's like the biggest, no growth. So that's like the biggest type of pain that we'll all feel. and that runs for every business in every sector. So it could get terrible, to be honest. But
Where I
you
think
can't get out of bed and
where I think the
not
resi
do
market
anything.
is slightly different though is people have to rent. You know, that there hasn't really
Necessity.
been a world that we're used to in the UK where people just go, right, well, we're not paying rent now. Like, people might go, I'm not going to go and buy, you know, that weekend away in, you know, Kosovo or whatever it might be, or go and buy a new set of headphones or whatever it may be. But we're always in a world where people rent. So we're in a slightly unique market that we're obviously supplying the bottom layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we can still operate in a rental space. I think it's obviously when you get stagflation and you get a market where people aren't pushing themselves to buy that bigger house or buy a new flat and stay rented. I think we're in a very unique space in that respect. But one thing I would say is when our we've been through two big changes since we've been doing HMOs. One's the energy prices did double. You know, we looked at actual like peak to trough within like a 2-year period. Our utility costs went from, I think it was something along the lines of like £75 per room to £150 per room. And we've also been through a period where HMO mortgage products went from 3% to 7.5%. So that has doubled. And all of our assets still made money with both of those things happening. Actually, we could have stretched them further. And I just think it's a reminder to not be greedy and to be strategically growing, because you can, you know, the common phrase is, you know, when the tide goes out, you see he's been swimming naked. You know, it comes to mind if you've not got enough of a buffer in your business, then you're running way too thin on margins anyway. You probably shouldn't have done the deal in the first place. There are obviously doomsday scenarios where you probably can't even, you know, I've heard of times in 2008 when businesses couldn't, you know, there wasn't credit there, so they couldn't run their operations or keep their teams. But I think what we've been going through of late, which is like bad, I mean, you know, obviously bad run of government with Liz Truss, and you know, I saw a photo the other day. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it says something like a yogurt was bought here the other day and it lasted longer than Liz Truss in standing for the government. And when you've been through that, like, it's easy to make excuses and to find times when you can't invest. But I think that there's always opportunity to invest. You've just got to be really strategic and have a buffer. One of the guys I went to Vegas with runs a Amazon FBA business, and he's doing really well. Like he's I think he's in the top 100 in the UK in terms of how much stock he pushes out. And he was telling me that there's a lot of Amazon businesses going pop because Amazon brought out a credit facility where you could draw down like a buffer of cash flow and lean on Amazon almost like a bank. And then they released it, and it was £500,000, and a lot of people took advantage of it and boosted their stock growth. And then apparently that just overnight they removed it and they said, we're not doing this anymore. So you had to pay it down and you weren't allowed that facility anymore. And he was telling me that all of his competitors, well, not all of them, obviously, but some of his competitors going pop because they've, you know, been relying on this source of funds which came and has gone. When he just built up cash pots himself so that he could be a bit more flexible and a little bit more in control. And I think it's just about building that buffer and understanding the risks. And you can do a risk register in your business. You can like write down all of the potential risks, write down the likelihood, how critical it is to the business, and address those now and have measures in there, so that if, you know, the war or you know, World War III kicks off and oil prices do quadruple, what do you do in your business and in your portfolio to protect it? And it might be now, you know, putting as many solar or battery operations within your buildings, like Stuart's saying, and sort of trying to manage that risk. And sometimes it's about risk management rather than growth.
Well, I think there's definitely there's definitely a downside, obviously, particularly with HMOs, where energy prices go up and then utility bills could go up and things like that, and solar panels and air source heat pumps things are a way to hedge against it. But I think fundamentally those things do get priced into the market, and all tenants will end up having to compensate at least somewhat. But I think the bigger risk for us is on the construction side and the lagging effect that can happen on the supply chain. And is how you manage that risk. You know, if you've got, particularly in Dorian's case, where he's got pipelines that stretch 2, 3, 4 years out, Do you just build in extra layers of contingency, but knowing that you're going to kill almost any deal that you're appraising?
That's
Like, what's
literally
the way
what's
to do it?
happening now, because we've got a couple of sites. We're negotiating on a site right now that we have that will last over 2 years in the build phase alone, and we're could potentially be a year away from starting on site. So with stuff, which everything we're working on now, we just secured a site last week as well, for another 20 units. We're not expecting to be on that site until 2026. Every price you would negotiate now with the housing association, all of their models are based on today's, and they're slightly out of date. It's based on today's viability, today's financial support. The government aren't releasing, oh, if this happens, we'll do this, so you can model that in. There's none of that. So there's a huge level of like speculative risk that anyone in this sector is operating in. And yeah, as you know, between 2021 and 2023, with ultra high inflation, it is my opinion, is the direct result of huge insolvencies, including the likes of ISG. To be honest, it's regardless of how flawed some of these business models were going forward, it's like costs go up 20%. Just nobody is on a 20% margin. Most private developers aren't on a 20% margin. In a stagnant market, it's anyway, it's what it is. Risky business.
Definitely.
ChatGPT is saying that it believes that there's, given recent affairs, well, when I say recent, in the last sort of decade, there has been built more resilience in the oil market, including the US, Brazil, pulling a lot of requirement from the Middle East over.
Over to Russia.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what does happen with the US election, because I think that's actually probably more pivotal than the actual drama that's going on.
Well, the US election
Yeah,
could inadvertently affect the Middle Eastern war, couldn't it? It is sketchy what's going on in America. I mean, I don't know if you guys follow it much, but it's nuts that the Trump and Elon Musk pairing, like these two are like hand and fist now, and it's a very like obscure pairing. Someone who's historically a Democratic voter now pairing with someone that's got the kind of perception that Trump has is fascinating to watch. And there was an interesting interview actually that was done between Kwasi Kwarteng. I
Yes, I was about to say, and Rob Moore.
And Rob Moore.
Have you seen it? I've not watched it yet, but it's on my downloads.
Really good. So anyone out there listening, there's a guy called Rob Moore in the UK, runs Progressive Property. He's a really impressive guy of what he's done within the property sector with the training business, and they do developments with his partner, Mark Homer. And Rob's got this pretty big YouTube channel where he interviews interesting people. I think he's friends with Nigel Farage and things like that. And he does an interview with Kwasi Kwarteng, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer when Truss was in momentarily. And he was in for, I think, 28 days before getting completely boycotted by, we'll speculate, but by the pension funds and major banks, who said that his budget, along with Truss, which Truss did instruct, would bankrupt the country, cause high levels of inflation, unfunded spending, things like that. And he basically says, he's very candid in this interview, quite like how he comes across. He basically says the banks will just never let this country build property at the rate we need it, because fundamentally it's so, and I'm twisting his words a little bit here, but what he's insinuating is the banks can't have property values go down. They can't have a saturation of the market because a lot of their debt is built into the housing market. So they can't see values go down. All their debt is built into the housing market. So the banks collude with the major landowners, with the government, and ensure that planning policies stay stringent, that construction costs don't get too cheap, etc., etc. It's why modular house building will never work. Modular house building just won't work because it brings down the cost of construction too much, which inadvertently affects house prices. And the banks can't have that happen. It's too risky, probably for all of our own good, based on the
I disagree with that. I think modular will work in high value areas where the land values are too high and you need to get in and out, especially in town centres. I mean, that's a big passion of mine, is to try and build on.
Yeah, but that's more of a
ground.
That's more of a that's more of a niche. Like modular,
it was niche for every town centre in the
modular
country.
Definitely has its place in niche markets, but on mass market across the scale, on consistent pipeline. I don't personally. I'm with Ryan. I don't think we're not geared up for that.
We've seen company after company go bankrupt that have tried to do modular, big companies as well. Like they're companies that should be well capitalized. Yeah, LNG, like they're just not going to let it happen. But Kwasi Kwarteng, he insinuates, that the powers that be just won't let it happen. That they need house prices to be as suppressed as possible.
Interesting.
But sorry, Jack. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to touch on. So the national house building target was always 300,000 over the last few years when the Conservatives were in play. Labour have now pushed that to 400. I think they're probably overshooting to get everyone motivated to aim towards a different target. There's two flaws in all of this. They actually count if a unit is being built and a unit is finished within one calendar year, that will get counted. And then the following year, when the unit that was being built last year is then finished the following year, is then counted for a delivery of a unit. So one system is flawed. Like I think it's something like 35 to 40% discrepancy between a unit being built and built is counted twice. But we're nowhere near the 300 mark. I think on average over the last 5 years, we're about halfway there. But the reason that I brought that up is because interestingly, I was speaking to a national procurement company, a big company, so they supply a lot of procurement for national home builders, SME developers. And they were saying that if we did get up to 200,000, we wouldn't have the materials to procure that delivery. So that
who's going to build them?
Well, it's like we're complaining about the planning, but if we did all get planning succinctly and be able to be on site, there would actually be a material shortage, and there would probably be a labour shortage. I mean, there already kind of is a labour shortage. So there's other factors that need to come into play. So it's not all just planning; it's also the procurement of materials, and then we'll be bringing in materials internationally. And now we've left the EU. What does that cost from a perspective to ship materials over here? There's a lot going into playing for it, and that's
there's also an adoption rate, an absorption rate, because you can't go into. We had a guy from Barrett's come in and have a bit of a chat, and he was saying that you can only build so many in a certain town because if you go and flood the market, there's no one actually there to buy them. So you have to sort of drip them in all over the country strategically. Atop of
that's why you still see some house builders not building timber frame because it is all linked to the sales rate. There's no point in building faster. If they can't
this is where the SMEs are so important, because we don't just build block 100 unit sites and sell every single one of them. We might be a little bit more in, we keep 50% of our stock to rent to the rental market. You show me a national home builder that does that. I know that there's a few now that are starting to look to do it, like the Berkeley Group. But that's why it's important for the SME property development space to be supported, because we won't just sell and therefore the sales rate isn't compromised. We will also let, hold, refinance, HMO, whatever it may be, which is why we're imperative to this market being the way it is, and we're not delivering enough.
It's variety, isn't it? Like SMEs fundamentally provide variety to any sector, like let alone just property. And if we're not there to provide that variety, and there's not variety in the marketplace, then
the SMEs. This is something that when I was in the Welsh Parliament, the Senedd argued for as well. It actually, there definitely is a labour shortage, but then when you start bringing in the SMEs, and the supply chain to SMEs are different to the supply chain for national house build as well. It's a whole different. So it actually helps because it's not. It increases the pool of available resources to like smaller, even some SMEs when they're building sites are still working with one-man band subcontractors, whereas national house builds on a 200 unit site there's just no place for that. It's you've got to be geared up differently. So, but you need both. You can't hit the targets without either or, in my opinion. But the problem is because they're so behind then on planning, they end up then only focusing on large sites to try to hit big numbers off quite quickly, which leaves the SMEs out. Does that make sense? It can take you just as long to secure planning permission on a 7-unit site as it could on a 100-unit site. That is disproportionate, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we had one
totally unfair as well.
It's interesting you say a 7-unit site, because we've got an 8-unit site that's been going through for about 2 months, just a conversion of terrace listed, but it is a listed building, into 8 apartments, or 9 apartments actually. And the plan is yesterday, after 2 months already, asked for an extension to the 25th of January. I was just like, yeah, sure, because it's not like if I say anything different, it's going to be useful anyway. So we just went, yeah, fuck it,
Well,
extend it.
we read a validation letter yesterday on an application we got in, and this isn't for planning. This is for SAB in Wales. You need SAB, which is to do with surface water. You know, the rain. You need planning and that, otherwise you can't legally build. And the validation notice said that it's got a 7-week determination period, and if we don't respond to you by the end of that 7 weeks, the application will automatically be refused. So you're like, excellent. All right.
So you've got to work to a timeline, but they don't.
Yeah, well, yeah, they've now got a time scale, and if they don't hit that time scale to meet their deadlines of like hitting time scales, it'll just automatically be refused. That has actually happened to us twice so far with the SAB system, and you have to resubmit. It's just crazy. Like when we got one application in now, they've not responded at all, and now the deadline for that 7 weeks is in 2 weeks, and we're chasing, and we've had zero response, zero feedback. So if they do have any issues with it, it'll be refused, and you have to resubmit. That's just.
Wouldn't it be nice if they had 7 weeks to answer your questions as it automatically gets approved? That would change the game a bit, wouldn't it?
That's what the private sector would do.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's
deemed consent. That's deemed consent. I mean, that's all prior conditional, but it's to try and get them to put a bullet up their arse and get them to hurry up.
Now you've got deemed declined.
Deemed declined.
So you can literally have it where they just don't look at the application for 7 weeks.
That's unreal.
And then they just
imagine living in a world where you don't have to be liable to your either actions or lack of actions. You know, it's just a completely different world that you've got to get your head around. That you could just turn up to work, do basically fuck all, and not care.
Yeah, basically, because that's what it incentivizes. You turn up to work and play Snake all day on the Nokia phone. Joking, that's just, I know it's not like that, because I know when you do look at the stats, some of these case officers genuinely have like over 100 cases.
Yeah,
it's just they I do understand the under-resource issue, and when you look at like when they advertise for new jobs, the local council, they're like senior planning officer, come in to manage this. 30 grand. You're like,
yeah.
But all that says, all that says, and I understand the under-resource issue as well, is that they shouldn't be taking on these jobs anyway. They're not capable. They're not capable intellectually, and they're not capable from an energy standpoint the way that private sector people are. So why are they doing it anyway? Like, at what point did the government wake up and go, do you know what? We just shouldn't be involved with this. We need to completely lay ourselves back to just the referee standpoint, where maybe get involved with the contentious ones, but it should just be given to the private sector and let them fight for it, because we'd all pay more for it.
Comes back to the establishment. Yeah, it all comes back to the establishment, and then the banks, and then the money.
Exactly,
and it's all linked.
Everything's
linked. Every war.
About. Yeah,
that's why I'm going to listen to that on the drive in a minute, because it's been on my downloads for a few days. Just to go back to the risk register, what Jack was saying, thinking about the four of us quickly, we're all working to, like you said, the lower end of the market. So we are already naturally doing that. So Dorian's obviously in the affordable housing market. You've got us three are in HMOs. I mean, I know Dee does a few of those things, and then even Jack and I are doing apartments. Yeah, we're doing some high-end apartments, but they're still apartments. So in a market where energy crisis and people have to sort of rein it in a bit, they're going to come to us as more of a. We're already doing that, I think, naturally. It's just looking at the market. We're not trying to sell 5-bedroom luxury houses, and make a 20% margin on millions upon millions. I think people downsize into our stock, so I think we've got that to take as a positive, if anything else.
Sorry.
I was going to say one thing we haven't touched on yet, and it might be a conversation for another day, is I'm seeing an ever more problem, and I'm not sure how prevalent it is in Wales, is the actual biodiversity net gain regulations that have come in planning. I honestly, I'm resubmitting planning for my own place, and I cannot believe how difficult it is just to get a fucking decision. We've been stalled 3 months to prove that I'm improving the so for listeners out there, the biodiversity net gain is you have to basically prove any new site is improving the biodiversity, so like the environment, the greenery, the nature, by 10%, which is quite a mean feat. So that's if it's got 2 trees on there. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. If it's got 100 trees on there, you'll have to make sure the greenery is 10% further, and that's in everything. That's open land space, meadowland, trees, ponds, whatever it may be. Coincidentally, my plot has got all of those things on it. It's got a pond, trees, bushes, and it's kind of like the better it is, the worse, because then you have to improve it more. But it's like it kind of like no one knows what they're doing. We've got a consultant in that's done a report to show that my biodiversity net gain is like +3 credits, and I can do an off-site contribution, which will be a couple of £100 because I've agreed to do a lot of landscaping around it, which I want to do anyway. But nothing's happened for 3 months. I've been to the architect. I was like, "What is holding this up?" And he's like, "Oh, the BNG." And I'm like, "Well, what are they waiting for?" And he's like, "Well, we couldn't prove that you're giving 10% back onto the site, so we're now having to do an off-site contribution for this is one house on one plot that is got nature all the way around it." And I'm having to do an offsite contribution. I'm like, fine, I just want to get it done now, get the application. And he's like, well, we can't submit it until then. And I called him yesterday, and I was like, what is the hold up? And he was like, the BNG consultant is confused about the BNG on this site. And I was like, it couldn't be more straightforward.
Yeah.
Like, and
yeah, but we've got an allocated site in the LDP that we submitted planning for. And Wales, I would argue, is even worse than England because they have no calculator to calculate the biodiversity net benefit. Basically, is what they call it. So it's quite it's very subjective. It's all depends on the opinion of the ecologist in the council, the local authority's ecologist, ecology officer. And we are having a nightmare across nearly every single local authority. So we're really, our land criteria has shifted. So we're not looking for any sites really with, ecology is up there as like one of the top now barriers to doing a site. Because like I said, we've got a site that's allocated in the LDP to provide 20 new homes to the area. We submitted planning for it after a positive pre-app. Everything's fine. All consultees have come back fine. We cannot get past the ecology point. If you zoom out to that site, it's bear in mind it's white land now in the local development plan. You zoom out, it is surrounded. It's actually there's housing and our site's in the middle. Natural for it, more housing. If you zoom out past that housing estate, it is surrounded by swaths of protected high ecology area sinks. You'd never build there. That's fine. But we're not, we're trying to build in an allocated site, yet they cannot determine what the net benefit requirement is. We have the council's ecologist saying you can't build on the site at all. And you're like, that's crazy. You have then the other council's ecologist who deals with projects saying, that site is perfectly acceptable to build on. It's not even a problem. So yeah, it's just a huge issue.
Do you know, it's crazy, right? Do you not think that's just delay tactics still? Like, why can't you just zoom out and go, right, for every site, there's a table, a bit like the S106. This is what you're doing. This is the contributions. And then the government
is because they've brought in a
self-fulfill.
It's because they brought in a new policy that the UK went into a biodiversity crisis, which, I understand as well. But the problem is they've brought in a policy without actually, again, working it through the ecology and house building will always clash. There needs to be a lot more. It's basically a top-down approach.
Well, unless you go to like Germany or Denmark, they do a pretty good job of balancing the two.
Quite a lot on my land, though.
But the problem is that you just have these individuals with free range. Like you're an ecology officer, your job now in this new policy, we're in a biodiversity crisis, is to protect ecology. They say, okay, no problem, you can't build anything. That's basically what's happening in Wales. To a point.
How crazy the ruling was. The first sort of rendition they had to bring out BNG. Apparently, they had it in a criteria. They brought out the criteria documents, and they basically said from a soft landscaping and tree perspective, you have to improve the BNG by 100%. And they released the papers, and it was the BNG package was correct, forward, and they started doing reports and turning reports down. Then the council realised that if you have one tree and you plant one more, that's 100% gain, and a hedge classified under that foliage that they had. So if you just put two 2 trees as a hedgerow, you've hit your bud at BNG for the site in that section. And then they're like, oh fuck, that doesn't work. So they then went back, and now they've improved it to say that you have to have X amount of coverage on the site plus a percentage on that sort of tree line or hedge line or whatever it may be. So yeah, they're fumbling around in the dark, and it needs. For me, I actually think it's going to be drastically changed. I think they need to completely revisit it because they're going to find out that it's stalling a lot. And I've got a site that's bare, being rented by a guy storing cars, and I'm thinking about just putting in planning until the BNG's improved, because they'll just, at the moment, it's just going to get absolutely punished.
Yeah, but you've got the issue, yeah, and
or just buy car parks.
Just
buy tarmac spaces, man, and just stick a
well, I mean,
wild meadow at the bottom.
We definitely look, when we're looking at sites now. We're looking at more sites with less existing ecology on it. But we can't. The problem is when you're a brownfield SME developer and you're basically you're fighting for scraps in terms of land availability, which pretty much all of us are, because there just isn't a lot of opportunity out there. You have to look sometimes at what you're given. But the problem I got is that the sites that we're working on were in the planning system before the biodiversity new policy came in, but they retrospectively applied it to everything already in the system. That's what's really slammed us, and has put sites that we own, because we've got a few, just on hold for over a year. And we've got another site now we just cannot get an answer. Basically, 1 minute they're okay, next minute no, you can't build. But they is very extreme. It's like, you just can't build on this site, and you're like, you'll never build anywhere then if there's fucking
We've got a pretty unique issue up here in the Teesside region. I know it's the same down in Bournemouth as well, I think. But that's the nutrient neutrality issue. I was dealing with it again yesterday. So we've had 4 different sites that have been impacted. 2 of them we've gone through, got the credits, and paid the whole thing, gone through the whole process, and now we're in the process again with 2 new sites. And I mean, it's great for local ecologists who have to do all the credit calculations. So they have to look at the property and see what its I can't remember exactly what the terminologies are, but what its output is on the water supply, and then see that based on your plans, how much additional load are you adding to that building and its output, and then there's credits calculated on that. A simple way to say it is each unit generally is about 1 credit. So each additional HMO room is 1 credit, each additional apartment is 1 credit, and each credit is about £2,700. Which gets really fucking expensive really quickly. So we're having to pay £5,000 on an 8-bed. It's an existing 6-bed, so we can use that as 1 credit already, and then it's two additional credits. But the ecologists are having a field day because they're having to do all of these credit assumptions and calculations everywhere, all these credit application forms. And she came back to me and said, this will cost us something like 4.75 credits for this 8-bed that we're doing. And I was like, and I don't know anything about the calculations really, like compared to this ecologist that should be trained on it. And I went, I'm not sure I agree with your calculations there. I dug through it because we'd done a 7-bed as well. And I went, on this 7-bed, they basically told us that a 6-bed is worth 1 credit because it's under PD, and each additional room is then worth an additional credit. This property is a 6-bed, so we're not changing that. It's a 6-bed, but we're adding 2 rooms, so it should just be 2 credits. Took her a week to go through it. To be fair to her, she was quite quick with doing it, came back and went, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was 2 credits. So if I didn't have the experience with a 7-bed before, I'd have paid another £5,000 on top of what I was paying because she didn't know how to do it properly, who's like a trained ecologist.
We love people that can count from 6 to 8.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like, how do you fuck that up? Like, I'm not trained in it, and I just went, well, hang on, shouldn't it be 1? We already got the 1 because it's already a 6-bed, and then it's just add 2. Is that what it is? It took a week to do it.
Leaning back to our housing targets, did you know there's it's 198,000 homes that are stuck in planning from water neutrality, and it's mostly predominant in sort of South Coast, where you say Bournemouth and Kent. We actually had a site in Canterbury, which was, we just literally snuck by it and traded the site on with planning. But another big problem that they could address and get huge amounts of planning applications approved, it's just in down south, they're not even doing credits. It's just frozen. So there's developers that are absolutely crawling around to try and find sites to move on to, because there's a complete lack of sites. They're
And it's
just
such a
still in
con.
planning, pending.
It's such a con as well because it's the big industry in farms using pesticides that have caused the issue, but they're using the planning system as a red tape barrier to just charge people money, charge developers money, and get the private sector to front the cost. Like it's so backwards. And the councils, by the way, also don't like it. Like, so it's not like the councils are going, oh yeah, more money for us, because it's all natural England funding. So the councils hate it as well because it's creating more of a headache for them. Ecologists are the only one that win from it because it's just a shit ton more work for them around here. But most sites, developers just look at and go, "Oh, nah, it's subject to nutrient neutrality. There's just no way of making it stack. Like it's just not going to work." So yeah, all fucking nonsense. But anyway, I've got some other bits here we can go on to, unless there's something that we want to throw around the room.
Well,
Anyone got
I
any other?
just see. Obviously, I've seen the warning there about this. Do you see Vistry Group? Their cost understatement on their jobs by what was it, like 110, 115 million? You see, they've issued a
What's that as
profit
a
warning.
percentage?
Their share price dropped like 30% yesterday.
Time to buy.
Yeah, well, he's already creeping his way back up. But I calculated if you bought it yesterday on the news announcement, you'd already be up 11.5% in a day. That's not bad, is it?
It's not bad, mate. It's not bad at all. What's happened to them there then?
They said that they linked it to the Southern Division, where they're basically as you all know, with developments, when you've got a live site on, you're calculating always the cost to date, cost to complete, and the live margin for the job, basically based on projections. Vistry operates predominantly now in a forward sold business model. I know they still have their private stuff, but they're more of a partnerships company now, aren't they? That's what the whole model was geared to. So they work in forward selling sites and being funded to deliver them. But the problem with that is that you no longer have that benefit of capital appreciation in a job. So if your costs go up, but you could always say that, the sale prices have gone up 2% or 3%, and it literally like masks it. Whereas the sale price is fixed. So the costs are the costs. And what they didn't do apparently in the Sun Division is their cost to complete was understated, and therefore the margin was overstated by 110 million or something. They've linked it to that one division apparently, but I can see anybody in that sector is very prone to having that. Obviously, they operate on a much larger scale, but yeah, it's so they got slammed for that recently, and they're saying they're going to be changing management and stuff. But
Whoopsie.
Yeah,
Whoopsie, too much profit.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's a tip actually out there for our listeners, and it'll be good to hear your guys' views on what you do with it. So every time we do end of year accounts, we do revalue our assets. We do make a conscious effort to make sure that we're going back through our portfolio and seeing if they are more valuable than the previous year. And the reason that we do that is because the revalue of the assets, obviously your mortgage stays the same, and it's the potentially capital appreciation or improvement in market, or alternatively, when you finish the HMO, you just wanted to get it refinanced, get it cash flowed, and maybe you didn't eke out all the potential value that it was had at. And the reason we do that is because it improves your balance sheet to be realistic. It improves your capital reserves, which you don't pay tax on until you exit the asset, and it improves your accounts. So obviously your P&L is one thing, but your capital reserves and your balance sheet is another. So we always make sure every year we make a very conscious effort to go through every asset and go, has this changed in value? We're fortunate that nothing's changed in value for the worst, and reflect that in our accounts. And we always make a conscious effort to do that. And I mean, it's kind of tying into Dorian's point that Vistry have kind of maybe overcooked the exit values a little bit too much because the costs have gone up, but maybe the values haven't gone up. But on a smaller scale, for us lot, we can make sure that our accounts look healthy, which is obviously helps for future investment, your ego, whatever it may be, in the account.
More boring. I didn't think you could do that until you. I think you can only do it every 3 years, and you have to get then a proper evaluation done. Can you just?
You can do it whenever you want,
change it yourself?
as long as you get.
Yeah, but you don't pay for valuations though.
Yeah, I mean it's so you should really have a RICS valuation. Your accountant should advise you what they would like to see. We've before just contacted an estate agent and said, what would you value this at? As a third party resource. Your accountant probably will say a RICS chartered surveyor, which is a bit of a pain in the ass. We do have a surveyor that just does desktops, and say, I did this last year. I think that the market's the same or might have improved slightly. But yeah.
Could you do it off market
Cool.
trends? So, in this area, house prices have gone up on average
Index link.
6%.
I mean, yeah. So accounts is a snapshot of everything at that time that you've produced the account. So if the value of the property is increased, then the value of the property is increased. What you're showing is the value of that asset in your books at that date. So it's actually more accurate to reflect it if it's gone up than if it's stayed the same or gone down. If you're saying that the valuation is the same last year but it's gone up, that's not really accurate.
Yeah, fair. Intrigue. All right, well, I've got some old questions that we've put in before. If we want to finish on a little sesh of these, I think one of them that we didn't get around to last time was quite a simple one, and I think we've gone through this before. But the question
what is 6 + 2?
No, if you could tell my ecologist, that would save me a lot of fucking money. So the question is, what are the top skills that you feel are essential when doing property development? So pretty basic, but maybe an interesting one, particularly for anyone looking to start a career in property development. Let's just go around the room. Like, what are the top skills that we think? Go on, Stu.
It depends on what part of the process you're doing. I mean, if you're heading deals, you need to be a people person. You need to be able to be a deal maker. You need to be able to negotiate. You need to be able to have the foresight to see the what ifs. If you are doing more of the operational side of the business, then you need to be more organized. You need to be sort of driven. If you're the contracts manager part of the build or operational part, then you need to be quite systematic. It comes down to the disc chart really and having a balance of everyone. But I think if you're going to be the head person or run your own business, I definitely think you've got to have vision, you've got to have design skills, you've got to have a C and above in maths, GCSE, because that's all development is really at the end of the day. It's fairly straightforward numbers once you get your head around it all. I would say, people skills and being a deal maker, because you've got to make sure that both sides of the field are winning or feel like they're winning. And you've obviously got to have the foresight to see where extra value can be added. I think that's that's my biggest skill. So that's what I think you need.
Naughty. D?
So I would say again, it does depend on the scale. Like if you're going to be like a hobbyist developer, then I don't think you need what I'm about to say. But if you're going to run a development business and take it to some kind of level of scale, I mean, the number one skill set really you can have is be mentally strong, because it is absolutely is a very difficult industry, very stressful industry. You're relying on a lot of people that you can't control. You're relying on a lot of things you can't control. And even if you do everything well, if the market slaps you in the face, you could actually walk out really, really bad. So it's there's a lot of ups and downs. Sometimes I literally feel like bipolar on a daily basis, and you have to be, I would say, really mentally strong to deal with that. And that is just it, eyes wide open. After that, then pretty much everything that Stuart said, but you have to have a high level of emotional intelligence. I would say that would serve you really, really well as a developer. Being able to get people smarts, getting the best out of people, reading the room, being able to change slightly how you come across, so you're versatile, working with whether it's investors or employees or clients. You're typically, you may be that central point of the development company. So high emotional intelligence for versatility, because you need so many people to make a development business successful. And then mentally strong.
Jack, what are you saying, mate?
Yeah, I mean, the lads have touched on most. There's a few more that I would add to that. People being, people orientated and understanding who you need to speak to when is really, really key. And one that will lead on for that is resourceful. Look at Dorian in his current office. He agreed to purchase lease option and then bought the building, and that's a huge asset to his business. That isn't, his normal social housing product that he's delivering. I think that's resourcefulness and essential to run any or every business. Creativity is one that I think is required for bigger companies. I think that you've got to think what are we doing, what are we good at, what's our unique selling point, and what's our sort of commercial strength. And then resilience. I think that I say resilience carefully, because I know people that do well because they're resilient, and I know people that do well because they really want it. And I feel that they can go hand in hand. The people that I have seen that fall short of it are either not really that resilient or don't really want it. And the reason I say that one is because I used to work in sales. I used to think I was resilient, but I actually just didn't want the job. I just didn't want to do the work. Like, I wasn't incentivized mentally and physically to like enjoy doing the work. So you can have a resilient person in a potential resilient role, but if you don't want it, that's like your whole why of what you need to achieve. That's what keeps you going and burns the midnight candle when you're thinking about things, and you've got to live and breathe this. They say that when you go into fitness, it's a lifestyle. When you go into development, it's a lifestyle. You live with it in your head 24/7, and that's required. And if you don't want it, you can't hack that, and it will eat you alive.
Yeah. I'd add two more things. I mean, definitely, if you want to do developments in the limit and you want to build a business, then you need fundamental business attributes as well, like with any sector. But even if you're doing it on a hobbyist level, if you're just taking on, say, one development site, I think it's crucial that, touching on the resourcefulness, that you're good at delegating and good at seeing people at face value and understanding, this architect talks a good game, but are they actually good at what they're doing? Like, you need to be able to know how to cross-reference and do some due diligence, and do that with not only your architect, but your solicitors, your brokers, your contractor, especially any specialist surveyors you may use, valuers. Like, there's so much you're going to have to delegate on just that one site, that being a developer, even on a small scale, you're effectively CEO of your development business, which is just that site. That one site is a business. You're the CEO, and you're delegating to all these third parties or internal people as well, or even to yourself. What can you do that you could take on your plate, and then what can you pass on to the architect? What can you pass on to this person? And if you're not good at delegating and not good at understanding roles and responsibilities, then even on a small site, you can really, really fuck it up, because you might not get your timings right. You might not get understand your own attributes well enough, or understand if the architect's good enough at their job. You might be easily manipulated by people who talk a good game. Contractors can be very good at talking a good game, so you need to be able to see through people and things like that. So delegation mixed with resourcefulness is really important at any scale. The other big one I'd say is critical thinking, or reasoning from first principles is another way it's known as in property development. You can be good at the delegation, you can set up the site, you can do all of this sort of stuff, but when there's a problem, diagnosing that problem might not be too straightforward, and you might need to think about the critical path to solving that issue and understanding the consequences of any other decision you may make. You don't just want to go, oh, okay, well, we won't do that extension now, we'll just do this instead because that'll be fine. Okay, well, that'll have a knock-on effect on your program of works, or your contract with a contractor, or your architect, or your planning permission, or there's all these knock-on effects. You have to be able to critically think all the time. And I think that's part of the reason why Jack mentions, if you're a developer, it's a lifestyle and it stays with you all the time in your head, because you're constantly thinking of critical paths. Every decision you make has such a knock-on effect that you can't just go, yeah, fuck it, we'll do that, because doing that could mean the difference of allocating another 100 grand to this thing. Where you get that 100 grand from? What's that going to do to the GDV? What's that going to do to GDC? Like, there's so many things that can get affected from one decision in development, because of how nuanced and how interdependent it is on third parties, on the economics of the deal, that I think if you can't critically think, you just can't be a developer, at least not at scale, unless you can employ someone who's really good at that to do it alongside you. That'd be all I'd add.
You need a balance of skills as well. Like, just to touch on what you just said, right? Like, yesterday we had a sort of technical design meeting about our Twickenham site, and there was like 4 different details that all have a knock-on effect, all have an NIA reduction based on the installation and what we need to do in the commercial space versus the residential space. And these different details were probably swinging at around 20 grand's worth of cost differences. And so having that sort of skill set where I'm sort of there, I understand it technically, and I think that's the bit I actually quite enjoy as well, is like I know a lot of the details. And if there's a problem on site, and even if you've got people that have got 20 years experience, I'm still very much there as a decision maker to go, we need to go this way. And having that foresight from a commercial background to go, actually, we need to think about doing it this way. It's just a balance between cost, doing what's right for the building, making sure that we're not going to use a certain type of insulation. It was more about the non-combustible materials that we were trying to use on an external wall. that would potentially have a knock-on effect at the point of sale, which could then have a massive issue longer term, which is there's a technical regulation that allows you to use foil insulation, which a lot of residential lofts will use, and what I'm used to using, which is basically combustible effectively, even if they are marketing it as non-combustible. The technical specification isn't entirely correct. So we've had to go down a PIR route, which has lost a little bit of NIA. So then it's a case of making bathrooms into showers. But all this has a big knock-on effect if we want to sell the 2-bed units, or if we want to keep them. And it's just you're having the foresight longer down the path to go, what is the long-term effect? Because if you make a decision today, in a year's time, it could be a fucking disaster.
Yeah.
So
it's
just experience, not
more
to go
isn't
too quick.
always more.
Yeah.
And
Exactly
do you know what?
I've got.
Go on,
I was gonna
Jack.
say, I've got a question for you lot, which might be a deep question. Why aren't you doing more?
Trying.
It's a question.
I would love to
Trying to
do
do
more
more.
at the moment.
Why?
I turned 40 in 3 months' time, and I've just said that the other day. I was like, I don't feel like I'm anywhere near where I wanted to be when I turned 40. Like nowhere near. But to other people, I think that I've done quite a lot, but I still feel like I'm just getting going.
What do you
Weird,
mean?
isn't it?
What do you mean by more? As in more in life in general, or more just in the business as it stands? Like technically,
you interpret. Why aren't you doing more?
All right, I can give you a few answers, because obviously I think all of us will agree we're all trying to do more, but there are fundamental constraints to scaling a development business, and it's pretty basic, isn't it? It comes down to it comes down to three things, because the two fundamental things are finding in good sites, so finding the stock and then raising the money. So those two fundamental things is getting quicker and more efficient at doing those, but equally having the right delivery team in the middle to actually fulfill the relationship between finding
They
sites.
call it the love heart of business.
Yeah,
Sales and operations. It's never balanced. Love is never balanced, Ryan.
exactly. Yeah. Love is never balanced, particularly in this game. And I'd say, if there's any reason why we're not doing more, even though I think we are doing quite a lot, it's because we need to raise more money, more clients, and find more sites. And that's basically my job. My job is to figure out how can we get more money and how can we get more sites, and oversee the ops to make sure if there's a problem, you're troubleshooting and fixing it.
Yeah, nice.
So
Which comes with more problems.
yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I've got a whole list of things I want to do, and really the common constraint across them all, to be honest with you, is just funding, money in the right structure as well. So I try to push every day. Really, there's lots of different things. Like we just launched an M&E division as well, because we don't need to do much, put in much money to do that. But really, I've got some of the biggest deals we're working on the table right now, which I need some additional funds for, and lots of other business ideas, which I think will be absolutely class, but they all need an injection of capital. So, I'm still, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone listening, I'm still the least paid person in this employee. I still reinvest everything. I put everything back on the table, and it's probably very high risk, but it's what I really love and enjoy to do. I just want more money to be able to not as real investment funds, but they've all got a bit of a longer payback period, like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So at the minute, if it comes from retained earnings or capital from the business, very quickly you can just be capped. You just can't do it. You just can't. So yeah, where did you look at some companies that are founded by people who just have good, strong connections, and they start the business with 10 million capital. You're like, I didn't start this business with 10 million capital. It started with zero pretty much. And I just know that if I was working with an investor with 10, 20 million, I would know how to take that to 100, 200 million. Very, very, I would. It's simple mathematics, boys.
I wish I had it, mate.
Maths.
You'd have my money, D. You'd have my money, mate, if I had any. I would say, what was the question?
Why aren't you doing more?
How much?
Why aren't you doing more?
I'd balance why when you doing more with when is enough, because exactly, it's never balanced. I think you have to be content at some point, and I wouldn't say I've lost the spark to try and become a national company, but it is fucking hard work. And then when you balance the lifestyle and the family time and actually what you have got and stuff, I feel like I'm doing
sorry,
enough.
Stuart, you let you finish, but that's what they say about the only reason why, or the biggest reason why multimillionaires don't become billionaires, is because they choose to stop they change, themselves, So, but yeah, sorry, carry on, mate.
Time is finite, right? I mean, you can do something that you enjoy and you can make decent money from it, but yeah, when is enough? What is enough? And yeah, I definitely feel like when I was 40, I'd have this nice big 5-bedroom house and have the double garage and have all this space, and it will come, and we'll just sell that projection. But you also start to analyze risk differently
You
as well.
sold all your crypto,
10
you'd
years
have
ago.
that.
Yeah.
No way, nowhere near.
Yeah, but Jack is right. I mean, you could technically have that. You're just choosing not to do that.
Well, I'm choosing to invest everything I've got
Exactly.
into assets
Yeah,
that
you're
I want
still
to. I
in
know I
investment
believe in the
mode, yeah.
future.
Yeah.
I want to try and get enough money to invest in UD. That's what I'd love to do, mate. That's the long
Your
term
sugar
plan.
daddy.
We'll
Fucking
come
right.
skiing then.
Yeah,
Let's talk about it.
You're going to start a crypto venture because that's pretty much where the market's going.
Yeah.
What about you? What about you, Jack? What are you saying? Why aren't you doing more?
Yeah, I mean, basically the same answer as Dorian. I feel that a new deal can fund itself, so that's not the funding that we require. We require the sort of soft cap that goes into the trading entity to get the trading entity to where the bigger deals need to be. The reason I asked the question is because I know a developer that was very successful, 30 years of experience, went into the sort of limelight of the property circles that we all know, and very quickly overstepped the mark, went too big, and went pop. And it's a question that, Ben is used to delivering 960 flats with the Berkeley Group, and then comes to our little puny SME property development business and is keen to do less schemes but bigger. So, if I said, we've got a 200 unit scheme, but we're only going to do one over the next 2 years, the funding isn't there. Like Dorian said, I don't know if we could sustain one site and also that risk, which is why we take multiple sites on. So we're on 6 sites with 6 different contractors with 6 different contracts with those contractors. But I think to myself, why are we not doing more? And I do think there is a ceiling to capability of growth and team. If you put our team under the stress of that one scheme, could they handle it? And do you need to re-resource and build that different team? And I think, and understanding that because I think a lot of our viewers would look in and think, these guys are doing a lot. I want to learn off, Dorian how to do the, £200 million pipeline of social housing, but there's a journey that goes to it, and what happens today and what happens tomorrow are 2 different things.
Which is more important than the actual destination, because that journey is the growth and the levels that you need to take more confidence and more risk. Because you tell me a developer, there's not that many developers that go from small to huge and don't go pop, which is like, if you look, if you put 20 people in a room, 19 of them are going to go pop. So do you want to be one of the 19?
Yeah.
Or take your journey at your speed to get to where you want to get to?
So if I hypothetically, if I was a JV investor, right, let's just say that fast forward to my business plan now, and I take it to where I need to be in, and I float it or sell it, and I'm cash rich, and now I invest in each one of you 20 million equity each. Well, what do you do?
Do what I'm doing.
You got 20 million, but would you do more? How do you do it? Would you deploy 20 million? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, our business works on the same grounds that, let's say 40% of the projects are equity, are equity investment, and 60% of it is debt funding, and the rest is profit that sits on top of that. So 20 million wouldn't actually. We've probably got 70% of that deployed today. So,
but it doesn't have to be just in property mind. It doesn't have to be just in property.
Oh, sure.
Just 20 million. I'm the business partner.
Is it free run? Is it a complete free reign? Whatever we want to do.
20 million. Let's go.
Cool.
I believe in you. He is 20 million.
Go.
Do it.
Yeah.
I know. I do.
I would take the 20 million cash. I would set up I'd ring fence a fund. I'd leverage it within the fund by resourcing more capital to syndicate that funds. I'd make sure it's FCA compliant, and then I would then go and leverage that in a debt position. I would then invest in any SME developer that meets the criteria within the south of the UK. And if they fail to deliver, we'll step in and buy a site 70p in the pound and finish it off.
What type of fund? Bridging, development, equity?
Development. Well, stretch senior. So we'll take like a pref equity position on the site.
Senior. Okay, excellent. And Jack, Ryan? No, sorry, Ryan.
Rob the developer, basically.
What's that, Stu?
I said rob the developer. Basically, is what Jack would do.
Yeah.
Come
Well,
a
if they
fucking shark.
deliver, they keep they have their
They
cake
get
and eat it. If they
10%.
don't,
Yeah.
I reckon Jack though would say that last
I'll take
sentence
their
just
arse.
after the developer signs the contract as he takes it back off them.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
perfectly.
Now, just by the way, just in case you're not sure, if you fuck this up, one chance, I'm taking the site off you. Have a nice day.
No, I mean, I wouldn't want to be delivering 15 sites here, there, and everywhere that you're adopting all of the shit show. I'd rather them finish it, make a profit, and give us the money back and compound it into the next deal.
Not like the
You can sell it
Salboy
to me
model
50p
then,
in a
Jack,
pound if you
no?
like.
Because they're
Sorry?
not like the Salboy model then. It's more because they take obviously the equity and they sort the debt out as well, and more of a senior stretch. So the developer's still putting in equity, right?
Yeah, I think that's imperative because if there's no when I say
Skin in the game.
developer, they could bring their own investor, but we've got a slice of the pie and a hurdle rate.
Yeah.
Almost promote structure, but they need some to bring some funds in.
Okay, Stuart.
Mine's very easy. 30% would be in infrastructure, and with a new play because that would open up loads of doors. I'd have 30% in capital reserves.
Sorry, 30%
and
in what?
30%
Sorry,
equity.
infrastructure with the new.
I'd have 30% infrastructure, and we'd rebuild the whole business model to suit the growth model. I'd have 30% in new deals and 30% as a cash reserve.
So you'd spend 6 million on infrastructure.
You'd have 7 million as a cash flow.
Yeah, fuck me. And it would all go in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's all going in Bitcoin. Yeah.
It wouldn't sit in physical cash. It wouldn't sphere. It would sit in as a reserve, but it would be there as a backup to us to take some bigger risks.
Wait, we've got a rounding
7 million
issue here. There's 2 million missing here, Stu. What are you doing with the 10%?
Oh, that's the rounding area. That's
his finding fee.
That's the cash flow for the cash flow.
Oh, mate, no, I'd have 30% infrastructure. I'd rebuild the whole model. We'd make sure that we've got a pipeline as big as yours, Dorian.
So yeah, infrastructure, new deals, I get
Southeast.
that. Cash, I think, is a bit high, but whatever. But then 10%, where's this 10%?
Cash flow for the cash flow.
So
that's on that new 5-bed house I want.
40% cash. Fuck me. Ryan?
I would, without trying to get too clever with it, because ultimately the best way to answer this is to sit down and really think, where are we now? How can we get to this sort of position? But if I was to go 20 million on developments as well, so I'm not copping out and saying I'd put it all. I'd start another fucking boy band. Yeah, that's exactly what I'd do. Piss it all up the wall in fucking 6 months.
Yeah.
No, I would. I mean, each of our commercials residential sites, of like 15 to 20 units, they're all pretty much around the £1 to £1.5 million capex. So I'd go out and look to secure 10 to 15 of those sites, fund them all cash, refinance them, move them on, and just do that. That's basically what we're doing now, but I'd just be able to do it quicker.
Are you sure that's what you would do? It could go into business, any business or development. If you think about everything you're doing now, because you're involved in education, you want to build your personal brand, you want to obviously build a pool. Is that what you would put it towards, or would you put some of that towards massively scaling your personal brand?
But why would you need to build your personal brand if you've got 20 million facility?
Well, exactly. Well, you tell me, Ryan.
Well, I mean, it would cost such a negligible amount of that 20 million for me to scale the brand. It would be so minor, and the return on me scaling the brand would pay for itself. So it wouldn't be a consideration of the 20 million. Like, let's say I take £1,000 of that and I employ 3 more editors. That will get me way more noise online, but that's nothing. That's not even a dent in the 20 mil. So the 20 mil I'd put into retained portfolio. We'd split it 50-50, 51 in my favor, 49 for you, D. I'd have all the voting rights. And I'd just build out an unencumbered portfolio that I can recapitalize when rates are at a good point, pull that money back out, go build some more, and then probably would diversify into maybe some commercial stock, some Bitcoin, other bits after we've washed through the first 20 mil. That would just, to me, would make the most sense.
How big a portfolio do you think you could scale in your area with 20 million equity?
Well, let's say it takes one. Say it takes 1.5
you
mil.
Could gear up.
Yeah, I mean, each site, say if it's 1.5 mil a site, getting about 10 to 15 units there. Say it's 15 units times by say 10. Let's say 10 sites. Then that would be 150 apartments, 200 apartments. I'd say somewhere around that. we'd split that 50-50 and then roll it onto then trying to get another 100, 150. And then we're leveraging our returns using what would then be a smaller deployed
Yeah.
or employed equity amount leveraged against a larger gross asset.
So
And that's how
over a
we scale.
10-year cycle, where do you think with 20 million, how many units do you think you could get it to?
Planning dependent. I don't know, maybe did you say 10 years?
Yeah.
Maybe 500 to 1,000 retained apartments, I'd say. Probably something like that.
I think you'd have to start with 1,000 figure. But so guys, so that there, right? With a bit of the answer to all of your questions is just find 20 million.
Nice and easy.
Simple.
With a very generous investor partner.
Because that really what you know, that's really what you guys should all be doing. If me included.
But there's also no harm in going 5 to 7 to 10 to 12 to 15 over a 6-year period.
How about the
7-year
four
period?
of us set up a fund that's a 80 million pound fund, and then we will direct it 20 million into each strategy, and it'll be for the fund's benefit as well.
Diversified, yeah. Well, everyone knows where we are if they want to reach out.
Yeah, if you've got 100 mil.
80. If you've got 60, that's also fine.
We can work with it.
Yeah, fucking even eight would be nice. But you make a really good point, though. It is a case of just raising more money. But at the end of the day, the reason none of us have done it yet is because it just, as a developer, it takes that time to nurture relationships to the point where you find that sugar daddy with 10
You don't want to take that risk. As well. If someone give me 20 million today, that's why I'd put 33 and a third into capital reserves. Is that I could get to about 200 units comfortably at that number.
What risk
working out in the southeast?
What risk?
Well, the risk is you're growing too quick. So as you grow a business, you're going to bleed cash and problems everywhere. The problems you don't even know exist are going to come up on your doorstep. And if you've overexposed and there's too many cracks or too many holes in the sieve, you will just bleed out until you die. And that's really where you need to go slowly. And I'm a massive advocate of that, is that there's no point running too fast and running into walls you don't even know exist yet. And if you take too many risks and say yes to too many opportunities, you will overexpose and you will probably die. And that's why it's easier to grow. It's much better to grow slower. And you can still grow like an S-curve because you're actually building foundations and pillars that are going to support what you're trying to get to.
If you
go from 6 to 36 to 236 units, you go pop. If you go from 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 to 30 and then sit on 30 for 3 or 4 years, rebuild the infrastructure. That's why I said I'd put 40% into infrastructure, because I'd build a complete development infrastructure from strip out through to final snags. That whole thing would require that sort of money to really perfect, and that would give you the confidence to build that into growth and into scale.
I would agree.
We haven't heard what D wants to do yet.
Yeah, we'll throw it back to D, but I just want to retort on that point just 1 second, because I would agree with most traditional businesses, but with a development business, if I'm doing 10 units in a site here or 100 units in a site there, my back end infrastructure doesn't necessarily need to increase tenfold to deliver the 100 units.
Correct.
I may need slightly more expertise, but I don't necessarily need a pro rata increase in overhead or in back office for the delivery. So development inherently is quite scalable from a monetary value perspective. Units, yeah, I agree. Like if you're doing 1,000 units compared to 100 units, yeah, fair enough. But just the inherent value of sites, and each site being a bigger site doesn't necessarily mean you need a big infrastructure.
I mean, even 100 to 1,000, you still wouldn't have to 10x your ops. You'd get economies of scale.
No, but I think you need to grow over 30%.
See, I definitely need better expertise. I don't think the percentage applies to property.
I'm not 10xing.
Like Ryan's saying, year 1 I did 1 house, year 2 I did 2. I've doubled in size. That's unsustainable. It's 2 houses.
Yeah, no, but if you're going to go into growth and into scale, you need to grow. I would say you need to grow about 30%, which is why I would put 30% of infrastructure. Not the because once you build it,
as much as you can. That might be 200%.
And it depends on how much control you want. If you don't want the control and you want to delegate everything out, then that's also fine. But that comes with huge risk, in my opinion. The more you can control internally, the better. But which will take time, more systems, more planning, team building. It requires so much to run a bigger company to do those sort of numbers, I would say.
I mean,
if you want to maintain control.
You know, there's a lot of points to this, because if you're experienced in the sector and experienced in what you're doing, you can grow at a very high rate, in my opinion, as long as because you should know the key pitfalls. It's kind of like where you see some of these, people who are experienced in a sector, they either exit their business and they start another one, and that business explodes really, really, really quickly. It's because they know they've been down the path, they know what to do, and they know what not to do. And so if you've got that kind of experience, then you should be all right. But when you're doing stuff that's completely brand new, of course, there are huge risks. Like every time we do a new build methodology, like it's always way over budget than what we expected. So if we were doing 10 sites and they were all brand new build methodologies, it would be every job would be a complete failure statistically, like from our experience anyway. So we've got to be really careful. Obviously now we've refined our methodology, our product, our what works well for us, and we just want to scale and rinse and repeat that. But it has taken a few years to get to that point. But like one of our first years of trading, properly trading, our growth rate was 700% from a revenue point of view. That's no, it's higher than that. That was over 2 years. It was the first year was actually a higher percentage. It's just obviously the next year was a lower percentage, which on average brought it down to 700. I think the first year our growth rate was over 1,000%. So obviously that's really, really, really unsustainable over a period of time. But as Jack said, we went from a very small figure to a high figure in not that many sites. So I think I don't think it's as easy to say. I think you can use the 30% growth rate only when you're at a certain like threshold. But to get to that
Agreed.
first threshold, I don't think that's the metric.
Inertia. Once you've broken inertia.
Yeah, once you get to that kind of like what we call critical mass sort of thing. Once you get to a threshold in business, whether it might be different for everyone, but for us, call it we're at 25 million annual turnover with at the moment, and then set to get to 45 million next year. But take it from there, 30% from there would be a very, very high growth rate. But we should be able to sustain that. If you start
with no more
700% from there, that's crazy.
Are you going to 25 to 45 with no more staff? Any more technicians? Any more middle
Not
management?
really. I mean, obviously, it flexes up and down a little bit, but it's our overhead is geared up for that. It's really the change in turnover there comes from our average sites gone from 20 to 30, and if you take that over 10 sites that we're live on, all of a sudden.
So Dorian, what's your just interestingly, because we're comparing, I'm the only one on this call I think that doesn't have construction in house. What's your turnover per employee?
If I ignore my groundworks team, because the turnover is, so I will give you a direct answer, but let me just explain. My construction business or development business, we have a division, which is the groundworks division. Obviously, that has its own turnover, but the construction company also has that turnover, if that makes sense, because it's direct to the client. So I'm ignoring the groundworks team because they have a lower revenue per employee. On my development business, we should be able to get £1 million turnover per employee. We're not at that right now, but that's what we're geared up to do. We're slightly more geared up for what we should be doing.
See, that's why I asked the question, because Stuart's will talk about all the infrastructure you need for growth. Our turnover to employee ratio is 6 million. So for every 6 million brought into the pipeline, which is the deal, we need one new employee.
Yeah.
Because we don't have construction in house, so we can grow. We can sort of flex and grow quite efficiently.
The £1 million per employee is because that's based on construction management as well. If you actually do more in-house yourself, like the groundworks team, that revenue per employee would be much lower than £1 million.
Yeah, sure.
So the more you go into it, the less actually revenue per employee you get.
Yeah.
The developer's model is a very efficient model with staff, like hugely efficient. Like you could get it's multiple of millions per employee as a pure developer, definitely.
Yeah, I think you have to look at directly and indirectly employed staff and delivery if you really wanted to get acute with like your development success. I think would be a fair way to do it as a developer, because there are developers that are, I can't remember the name of the group, but I know I think Jack D. I think all three of you know the name of them. There's like 4 of them, and they're £1 billion development company, but they're basically just upper level management. So their revenue per employee, if you just look at it as a gross sum, is quite a vanity metric, but realistically Yeah, if you
they're
look at their
on more like
profits.
promote structures and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so
They're £1 billion revenue, aren't they, with 4 staff or 5 staff?
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
but
fucking
they
nuts.
get a like a minority percentage of that overall revenue because they're more.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
more
yeah.
of a as
Yeah.
um.
But it's an exponential, man, isn't it?
So it's a bit it's one of those.
Well, guys, we are at 8 o'clock, and I believe Stu's got some shooting practice to go to. So,
Pew, pew.
end of episode. A good one, though. That was nice. Diving in
I'm going
deep.
to take my 7 million cash flow.
I'm going to
buy
go.
some fucking Bitcoin. But look, for anyone listening at home, we release these episodes every Thursday, 5:30 a.m. on Spotify and YouTube. Please make sure you subscribe and share this with anyone else in the space who wants to learn about property or is in the game and wants to hear other people talking shop. That is what we do here. And thank you for everyone that does engage with these. Watch them every week. Massively appreciated. Hopefully it's useful. Drop us some comments.
Cheers.
And we'll see you next week. Big
Au revoir.
love.
Ground up sound